This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The death toll from an IDP camp attack in the DRC rises to 70. Guinea-Bissau confirms 11 people were killed during a failed coup attempt on Tuesday. And Libya rejects the renewal of a migration deal with Italy. Hello everyone, welcome to Africa Live on CGTN with me, Beatrice Marshall, in Nairobi. Also coming up on the program, in sports, Senegal are through to their second consecutive final at the Africa Cup of Nations. And we begin with the latest from the DRC at the IDP camp attack. The death toll has risen to at least 70. On Wednesday, militants attacked a camp for internally displaced persons in Ituri province. Sources speaking to CGTN report that leaders in the province have called for a 3-day self-imposed curfew. The measure aims to protect civilians against killings. While no group has claimed responsibility, the UN says the Codeco militia is to blame for the attack. The head of the UN's peacekeeping mission in the DRC has, in the meantime, strongly condemned the IDP camp attack. Speaking to the media, the deputy spokesperson for the UN Secretary General, Farhan Haq, added that a patrol was dispatched to the site after receiving an alert. The peacekeeping force conducted a joint operation with the Congolese army. According to Haq, they were able to push the attackers out of the area and secure the IDP camp.
The UN mission dispatched a patrol to the site upon receiving an alert about the attack. They also notified national security forces, as well as its community alert network. UN peacekeepers exchanged fire with the assailants shortly after arriving on the scene and conducted joint operations with the Congolese army into the early morning, pushing the assailants out of the area and securing the IDP site to prevent further attacks. Humanitarian partners are providing medical supplies. This area is home to 600,000 displaced people. Our humanitarian colleagues are telling us that access by road is restricted due to insecurity, and the delivery of humanitarian assistance is challenged.
Well, let's cross over to Chris Ochamringa in Kinshasa. He's joining us live from there. Chris, what are the latest developments regarding this attack?
Well, Beatrice, according to humanitarian organizations in Ituri province, 10 more people have died from the attack on Wednesday at the internally displaced people's camp. These, the latest victims were people who had been seriously injured in that attack, and they were taken to a nearby health facility to get treatment. We have seen videos circulating on social media of women and children with very deep cuts on their heads and necks. It was a very terrible attack on the people in Ituri province. And we've also been told that many of the people at that camp, it's called the Plain Savo camp, have been forced to flee to other areas. Some of them have sought refuge at the UN base of the UN peacekeeping mission, MONUSCO, in Jugu territory, and many others have, tried to go to other areas. That had about 24,000 people who had fled another conflict in 2019 in Jugu territory, which was also, according to local officials, sparked by the fight between the Codeco and the Hema communities in that area. And this is one of the deadliest attacks since last year. In June last year, there was another attack that was carried out at Boga and Chabi village. About 55 people died. Many people in Ituri province are calling on the government to take serious action to stop these killings.
Oh, Chris, so what action is the government now taking to pursue the attackers and secure the area?
So the DRC government, first of all, has issued a statement condemning the attack in the strongest terms possible. They also expressed their condolences to all the families of the victims who died in this attack. And the military, the Congolese army, the FARDC, says it's going to hunt down the Codeco fighters in all their strongholds and do everything possible to ensure that they get justice for these victims. That is something that some leaders from Ituri province, MPs and other local leaders have welcomed, but they say they want to see action this time round because authorities in the DRC have always been making such promises to end this conflict, but then there are always attacks that keep happening almost on a weekly basis. According to some monitoring groups that have been following these attacks in Ituri, they're saying more than 1,000 people died since last year in that region. And so they are really appealing to the government to take this matter very seriously. And like you mentioned earlier, the officials also have called for a 3-day protest. It's known as a ville morte in French, which is basically a curfew, a self-imposed curfew, where they're trying to protest against these continued killings in their region. Beatrice?
All right, Chris Ochamringa joining us there from Kinshasa. Thank you. Staying in the region, though, at least 1,200 people have been killed in militia attacks in the Democratic Republic of Congo's Ituri province in 2021. That's according to the Norwegian Refugee Council that has been monitoring the situation. Codeco fighters have been blamed for massacres that have killed hundreds of civilians in Ituri in recent years and forced thousands to flee their homes, according to the UN. Recent attacks have also targeted displaced persons camps. Wilkisa Nyabwa tells us more.
Between Tuesday night and Wednesday morning, militia fighters massacred at least 60 people at Savo camp in Ituri province in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The government had placed Ituri province under a state of siege since May 2021, a measure taken to combat the escalating violence caused by armed groups roaming the country's mineral-rich eastern region. But the violence did not stop. In 2021 alone, the Norwegian Refugee Council estimates that at least 1,200 civilians were killed in Ituri province, and at least 68 people have been killed in attacks on 5 different displaced persons camps in the same area since November 2021. The UN mission in the country, MONUSCO, believes the attack was carried out by members of the Armed Cooperative for the Development of the Congo, known as Codeco. Codeco's fighters are drawn mainly from the Lendu farming community, which has long been in conflict with Hema herders. The conflict has led to the emergence of over 120 armed groups in the region. Fighting between the two groups flared between 1999 and 2003, but was quelled by the European Union peacekeeping force Operation Artemis. The emergence of Codeco is believed to have led to more violence in 2017. The area has been hard to secure as it is vast and remote. Following recent eruptions of violence, there are currently 1.7 million displaced people in the troubled Ituri province. Wilkisa Nyabwa, CGTN.
Another tragedy hit the DRC on Wednesday. At least 26 people were fatally electrocuted in the capital. In a tweet, the presidency said an investigation will take a closer look into the tragedy and those found responsible will be held accountable. The SNEL, which manages the country's electricity grid, said a lightning strike had severed a live cable. The cable fell into a drainage ditch in the market in Kinshasa. This led to several people being electrocuted.
When the rain started, a thunderstorm suddenly hit the electricity cable pole. When the cable gave way in its fall, the cable started to hit people around it. And as there was water on the ground, many people started to collapse successively.
This high-voltage cable, which caused the deaths of several mothers, there are dozens of them. More than 20, in fact. We are talking about 26. So that's why we came to identify the families so that we could bring help.
Guinea-Bissau's government has confirmed 11 people died in Tuesday's failed coup attempt. Government spokesperson Fernando Vaz says the dead included civilians, soldiers and security guards. At a press conference, Vaz called the failed coup violent and barbaric and praised the defense forces who stopped the overthrow. He announced a thorough investigation vowing to protect democracy and the rule of law. Meanwhile, West African leaders are holding emergency talks in Ghana's capital, Accra. The key meeting will assess the outcome of 2 missions to Ouagadougou following a military takeover last month. On Saturday and Monday, the military chiefs from ECOWAS held a talk to the junta in Burkina Faso. The delegation met ousted President Roch Kabore, whose well-being and demands for release from house arrest are major issues. ECOWAS has already suspended Burkina Faso from the regional bloc. West African leaders are seeking solutions to combat an increase in coups in the region. They're also expected to discuss Tuesday's attempted coup in Guinea-Bissau. Well, CGTN's Nabil Ahmed Rufai is following the developments closely from Accra in Ghana. Nabil, West African leaders are meeting in Accra. What's the latest there?
Well, Beatrice, indeed, the West African leaders have casted private very meeting will be held here in Accra. I know is that the ECOWAS dispatched two separate delegations to Ouagadougou to meet with the military junta after the coup, and the delegation.
Nabil Ahmed Rufai there in Accra. Meanwhile, the African Union has condemned the attempted coup in Guinea-Bissau and has called for calm and respect of constitutional order in the country. Delegates attending the 40th ordinary session of the Executive Council of the AU Assembly have reiterated calls for dialogue to resolve the multiple military takeovers in the Sahel region. CGTN's Daniel Arap Moy reports.
The last year has seen the unconstitutional transfer of power in West Africa, with Guinea, Mali and Burkina Faso seeing new leaders rise from their respective militaries. The African Union continental body has come out to condemn the latest attempted coup in Guinea-Bissau.
The resurgence, the recrudescence of unconstitutional change of government, which have dangerously been increasing over the past month, is a sign of great deficiency and deviation, as you have followed the coup in Guinea-Bissau.
We have the resurgence of unconstitutional changes of government that is undermining the foundation of our states and is undermining all our efforts for development.
Besides condemnation, recent coups in Africa have also triggered suspensions and even sanctions from regional and continental bodies as they continue to seek peaceful solutions to the political crisis.
We don't want to see, countries experience any form of instability, and we hope that, the regional economic community, ECOWAS, will deal with that situation, and African Union will, of course, deliberate on this matter as well.
The African Union has reacted with disappointing statements, putting pressure on the coup leaders to respect the constitutional order. For now, what seems problematic for the African Union is the refusal by coup leaders to relinquish power and allow for democratic change. Daniel Arap Moy, CGTN, Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
In Nigeria, a floating production storage and offloading vessel has exploded and sunk in Delta State. The incident took place in Warri in the southwestern part of the Delta State. Authorities say the cause of the explosion is currently being investigated. At the time of the incident, no fatalities were reported, but 10 crew members were on board the vessel prior to the incident. The vessel has a capacity to process up to 22,000 barrels of oil per day. It can inject up to 40,000 barrels of water per day and store 2 million barrels of oil. Well, Deji Bademosi has more for us from Lagos. Deji, what do you know? What more can you tell us about this incident?
Well, Beatrice, the company has actually issued a statement. That platform is actually owned by a company known as SEPCO, Shebel Exploration and Production Company. The company is jointly owned by a group of Nigerians and, of course, some foreign corporate entities. And the company issued a statement confirming the incident, that it happened in the early hours of Wednesday. And, of course, just as you've said, that there were actually 10 crew members on board the vessel when the incident happened. As at this moment, no one knows the fate of that 10 crew members now. The company says it is concerned about their safety and that the situation, the fire is being fought and that they are trying to bring the situation under control. As we speak, the company says there are a group of other companies that are operating around the area at Escravos now that are helping in trying to bring the situation under control, and that the local community and local fishermen are also assisting. So in terms of the likely spillage that may occur there, we do not have an idea yet, but when you consider the volume of oil being produced on that platform, then if this gets worse, then we might be looking at a terrible oil spillage. But for now, nothing has been said about that. What the concern of everyone is, and including the company, is to ensure the safety of the 10 crew members who were on board the vessel when it exploded. So the investigation, they say, is still going on, and they are trying to unravel the cause of the fire, and then they will take things up from there.
Deji Badimosi for us there in Lagos in Nigeria. Thank you. Well, Libya is calling for the review of a deal it has with Italy on curbing migration. Both countries reached the agreement in 2017 to step up cooperation and to fight migrant trafficking from Libyan shores. The deal was renewed for a further 3 years in 2019. According to Ahmed Hamza, the chairman of the Libyan National Commission for Human Rights, the agreement fails to take into account security conditions for migrants going through Libya. He also criticized the European Union countries for evading their legal responsibilities in dealing with migrants heading to Europe.
The agreement fails to take into account the exceptional and security conditions that migrants are going through in Libya as a result of insecurity, the proliferation of weapons, and the escalation of organized crime indicators. In fact, European Union countries are evading their legal, moral, and humanitarian responsibilities towards these vulnerable migrants who are destined for destination countries. The European countries are working to hold Libya responsible for these migrants in one way or another.
You're watching Africa Live, still ahead on the program. The U.S. plans to send 3,000 troops to Eastern Europe as tensions grow over alleged Russian plans to invade the Ukraine. The U.S. says it plans to deploy 3,000 more troops to Eastern Europe amid concerns that Russia could be preparing to invade Ukraine. CGTN White House correspondent Nathan King has the latest.
So as the US and NATO have accused Russia of building up troops on its border with Ukraine, they are sending more troops beyond its borders to the border with Russia. Announced 3,000 troops from the US will be deployed in Poland and Romania, 2,000 from the US, 1,000 redeployed from Germany. Of course, these are NATO members. Ukraine is not one, but at the same time, the Pentagon is saying that they want to send a signal to Russia about the unity of the NATO alliance.
We are making it clear that we're going to be prepared to defend our NATO allies if it comes to that. Hopefully it won't come to that. Nobody wants to see, as I said, conflict's not inevitable. There's no reason for there to be armed conflict in Ukraine or anywhere else on the European continent. And Mr. Putin can go a long way to serving that end.
But also, maybe one step forward on potential peace as well. El País, the Spanish newspaper, published what they call a non-paper that was leaked from the US that essentially says that they are willing to guarantee Russia that the US will not put certain types of missiles on Ukrainian soil or soldiers, whether that goes to special forces or not, we'll have to wait and see, but also ask Russia, of course, to pull back forces as well. It's an offer, at least, coupled with European arrangements about implementing the long-stalled Minsk process, which would lead to a more federal arrangement in Ukraine and the pullback of forces. All of this is underway, but there are essentially two problems here. First of all, we have the Ukrainians welcoming any deal, but also the US and other countries in NATO building up forces, but also saying they won't defend Ukraine. And meanwhile, Russia is still waiting for essentially a response. They've got a response, but a proper response, they say, from the US on its long-held security concerns that date back to the end of the Cold War about NATO encroachment into Eastern Europe. And this idea of Ukraine and perhaps Georgia joining NATO at some later date really worries the Russians because they feel they've been taken advantage of in their years in the twilight.
If one wants to avoid a negative scenario, and we do want to avoid it, then one needs to fully respect the interests of every country, including Russia, and try and find solutions.
Now, so far, the US has rejected any pullback of any NATO membership or not allowing NATO to be open to new members. It's a question of sovereignty, as they say, and they're saying that Russia needs to put out of Crimea and other areas that it accuses Russia of being dominant in eastern Ukraine. We do not have the building blocks yet for a new discussion on the security architecture in Europe. But it's amazing after World War II, the Cold War, that these things are still unsettled at the heart of Europe. Nathan King, CGTN at the White House.
Russian Vice Foreign Minister Alexander Grushko says the U.S. decision to send more troops to Europe is a destructive measure and would exacerbate military tension in the region. But the U.S. says the move aims to respond to changes in the current security situation and ensure that NATO allies obtain strong defense capabilities. Meanwhile, the press secretary of the Russian president said there is a possibility of a military conflict between Russia and NATO under certain hypothetical circumstances. He also called on the U.S. to stop exacerbating tensions in Europe. We begin your sports news in Beijing, where excitement continues to build in the Chinese capital. The city is preparing to hold the opening ceremony of the Winter Olympics on Friday at the National Stadium, also known as the Bird's Nest. So far, 70% of the athletes have checked in, and the International Olympic Committee convened a plenary meeting Thursday morning. President Xi Jinping gave a speech via video.
Chinese President Xi Jinping has delivered his speech via video at the 139th plenary meeting of the International Olympic Committee. President Xi extended a warm welcome to IOC President Thomas Bach and the committee members as they gathered during the Chinese New Year in Beijing, the first city to host both summer and winter games. President Xi said the world is experiencing great changes that have not happened in a century, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic. The world has entered a period of turbulence and vicissitude. Humanity is facing multiple challenges. Xi said the International Olympic Committee has been leading the Olympic Games to go forward, and it has made great and distinctive contributions in facilitating countries to cooperate and uniting the world to overcome hardships. President Xi thanked the committee's long-term contributions on China's sports as a whole, and its support and guidance to China on bidding and preparing for the Games. President Xi stressed that from the 2008 slogan, One World, One Dream, to 2022's Together for a Shared Future, China has been actively participating in the Olympic Games and consistently promoting the Olympic spirit. Xi said China is a true follower and practitioner of the Olympic ideology. Xi said, by organizing the Winter Olympics, China has mobilized over 300 million people to participate in winter sports. Meanwhile, China has boosted its regional development, ecological establishment, and quality of life. And China has opened up a broader space for the development of winter sports around the globe. President Xi said when the opening ceremony of Beijing 2022 is held on Friday night, all eyes will be on China, and China is ready. Xi promised that China will present the world a simple, safe, and splendid Olympic Games, in keeping with the Olympic motto, faster, higher, stronger, together.
In African football, Senegal left it till late to book their place in the final of the Africa Cup of Nations, scoring 3 times in the last 20 minutes to beat Burkina Faso 3-1. The Lions of Teranga were too good for their opponents in Wednesday's semi-final as they reached their second semi-final at the Continental Football Showpiece. CGTN's Mohamed Abubakar has more for us from Cameroon's capital, Yaoundé.
Abdou Diallo, Idrissa Gana Gueye and Sadio Mane were all on target as Senegal battled past a resilient Burkina Faso at the Amadou Ahidjo Stadium in Yaoundé. Aliou Ciss's men had 2 penalty calls overturned by VAR in the first half before a late surge in the second period earned them a 3-1 victory over the Stallions.
We know that it will be a very difficult final because we have either of 2 great African countries in front of us. That's Egypt and Cameroon. I congratulate my players for their involvement. I have an extraordinary group, a great group. I have been working with the Senegalese national team for 6 years. I can tell you that this is the first time in terms of mentality to have a group like this.
We have to admit that we were a bit short and limited physically. True, we have to admit it. But these are aspects linked perhaps to the preparation, because you know that we had a lot of problems in the preparation, a lot of COVID cases that didn't allow us to carry out an optimal preparation.
Jubilant Senegal fans exited the stadium with chants and dances as their team made it to their second successive AFCON final.
The last time we were in the final, we had no experience. But this time round, we are ready. We are going to lift this cup